All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. How are we doing today? It's great to have you. Happy Father's Day to all the dads. I know my dad's in the service. Happy Father's Day. Grateful for all the dads. Well, we are in our summer series, Summer Reset, but next week we're going to be jumping to a brand new series called Road Trip. How many of you would like to go on a road trip right now? After being cooped up for many months, I think all of us would love to go on a road trip. And what we've considered a road trip over the last 2 months has really just been a trip to like Target or Publix, right? But I'm talking about a real road trip. I know many of us are. Well, we're going to travel through the book of Acts in the New Testament, a large portion of that, and we are going to go on a road trip with a guy named Paul. So I can't wait. That's going to kick off next week. This week is the final installment of Summer Reset, and here's what this series has been about. This series has been about what can we learn from the difficult times that we've been going through? What can we learn? This is a question that we're encouraging you to ask both personally and then corporately. What can we learn? The Bible's quite clear that when you and I go through hardship, God is often teaching. As a matter of fact, hardship has the ability to teach us and mature us and develop us in ways that the life of ease and comfort just cannot do. So as we went through just a difficult 3 months, and we may not be quite out of the woods yet in different ways, whether it be job or health or whatever the case may be, we have to ask the question, what can we learn? And the first two things that we've said we've learned corporately is this. Number one, as Christians, when we live in a polarizing society, a culture that's very opinionated about so much, we need to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. I know that's not playing by the normal rules of social media and news, but the initial Christian response for us is to what? Be quick to listen. That's the response of the Christian. Last week, we talked about another thing that we've learned in this time. We have not been able to gather as a body for several months. And so something that I found in our cultures, we are hungry for community, and not just any kind of community, but gospel community, or in other words, the church. And so we've learned that the church is essential for our growth and maturation during such times as this. And today is like the last thing that we have learned corporately during this season. Again, I'm going to ask you to ask this question personally, though, as well. Because God's probably been teaching you uniquely in your unique set of circumstances, your unique health or job situation or family situation. This is just broadly what have we learned as a corporate body. We're going to look at the book of Joshua chapter 24, and we're going to look at one of the most famous statements in all the Bible. Some of you actually may have this statement in a piece of decoration in your house, but this statement is profound to us, especially during such a season. Now, let me go ahead and lay the context and the stage. The people of God are in the promised land. The leader is Joshua, and Joshua has gathered all the people of God back together, and they are renewing their covenant with God. What does that mean? Well, they made a covenant with the Lord, Yahweh, way back as they were exiting slavery, coming to the promised land. They made a covenant with God, and the covenant was this: we will serve you, fear you alone. We will worship you alone. We won't worship these other gods. We'll put them to the side. They lived in a very polytheistic culture, so they said, no, we are choosing to serve you. And the Lord's covenant to them was, hey, I'm going to make you flourish in this promised land if you serve me, if you trust me, if you revere and fear me. So Joshua gathers all the people many years later to renew this covenant, to remind them of how faithful God has been to them. So he kind of goes through a history lesson with them of how God's been so faithful over the years. And then he gets to this portion. Now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So Joshua essentially does this as they're renewing the covenant. He goes, I want you guys to serve God. I want you to serve the one true God. I'm reminding you of the history of his faithfulness, of his goodness, that he is the one true God. I want you to fear him. That means to revere him in such a way that you orient your entire life to who he is and what he's done for you. I want you to fear him, serve him alone. Don't serve all these other gods that all these other nations are serving. Serve him alone. But I want to tell you what I'm going to do with my household. Me and my household, we are going to serve the Lord. It doesn't matter like what the rest of you do. The rest of you can run from the Lord. You can rebel. You can be faithless. You can be unfaithful. You can worship and serve other gods. But I'm going to put a stake in the ground that me and my household, we are going to serve the Lord. And he makes that declaration. And I think there's two truths in his statement right there that you and I just need to kind of grapple with. The first truth is this. The home is where we are most influenced. The home is where we are most influenced. Right? I mean, literally, Joshua says, the rest of you, you could run from the one true God. The rest of you can serve other gods. But I want to let you know about me and my household. See, we can set the spiritual thermometer and temperature of our homes. And that will set the course, the trajectory for the rest of our lives and our kids' lives. The home is where we are far more influenced than any other place for the rest of our life. You look far more like your parents than you ever thought, not just physically, but spiritually. Our propensity, our nature is to replicate the very environment that we grew up in. Is to replicate the environment and our parents' model and example that when we are older, we reflect what we grew up in. Now, by God's grace, some of you may have had terrific parents. And ultimately, I hope that you model or you set the course of your life that follows in their example. Some of you didn't have a great example of great parents growing up. And so by God's grace, I hope that that all changes and that you begin to change your family tree. You begin to alter the course of your family. Here's how we know that the family is the most influential part of our life. I mean, just simply look at the stats. I mean, for fathers, here's some stats for the fathers. Go ahead. Children who feel a closeness to their father are 75% less likely to have a teen birth. 80% less likely to spend time in jail, 50% less likely to experience multiple depression symptoms. Do you know if the father is absent, the child is far more likely to commit a crime, far more likely to ultimately live their adulthood in poverty, far more likely not to graduate high school? Fathers, hear this on Father's Day. You are profoundly influential in your kid's life. You are irreplaceable. Your kids will model their lives after the example that you and I have set. Now, moms, you're no different. Statistics would show this, that an absent mom, this will ultimately lead to negative feelings of worthlessness, loneliness, depression, anxiety, problems socially, developing friends. So mom, if you're absent, your kids will have a hard time making friends. Behavioral issues, anger, hyperactivity, increased delinquency. Moms, you are profoundly important to your child. Why? The home is where we are most shaped. Joshua knew this. And he goes, me and my household, you could do whatever you want. You could set whatever road you want to go on. But me and my household are going to serve the Lord. And then truth number 2, and this is really important. Everyone must take responsibility for their spiritual health. You know, over the last 3 months or so, when we haven't been able to gather together, I mean, you had a choice sitting in your home. Like, are you gonna invest your life and in your relationship with the Lord, or are you not? At the end of the day, the Bible says that if you draw near to him, he'll draw near to you. In other words, you get as much of Jesus as you want. So how much of Jesus do you want? Well, for Joshua, he goes, me and my household, we want him and him alone. We're going to take responsibility for our household. We're going to serve the Lord and him alone. Doesn't matter what the rest of you do. Because the home is where we are most shaped, so we have to take responsibility. You have the responsibility to invest in your relationship with the Lord. You can't just sit there and expect to be spoon-fed by the pastor every Sunday. Surely this is a part of our spiritual growth and maturity. We look at the scriptures together. We worship together. We hear the preaching of the word. That's an integral part of our life, but it's not the only part of our spiritual health and vitality. You need to chase after Jesus yourself. So what do we do with this? How do we create a home that's taking responsibility? How are we cultivating a home that's planting a flag in the ground going, and we'll serve the Lord and him alone? Well, in part 2 of this message, we'll look at this big so what. How do we cultivate this? Continue to worship with us now. Well, there we go. Well, hey, I have said this every week, but I love having our kids in here worshiping together and even having this because I feel like I learn a lot from Holly every single week. And we love having our kids as we are holding off on kids ministries right now. So what did we learn in the first part of this sermon? We learned that 2 things are true. One is the home is where we are most influenced. And number 2, we learned that everyone must take responsibility for their own spiritual health. So the big so what? So how do we cultivate a home that takes responsibility? How do we take a home that is vibrant in its walk with Christ? So I want to give you 3 P's. So what? The first is be present. We have been forced to be around our children over the past several months, right? I mean, think about it. I mean, they were going to school and that was your 8 hours of going to work or 8 hours of break. But now they don't go to school. They don't have kids' activities going on, extracurricular activities going on. Parents, your activities and work have likely moved to the house. And so we are around our kids a lot. Let me remind you, this is a blessing, not a curse, right? I know oftentimes for many of us, we're like, oh my gosh, I can't take it anymore. When will school get back in session? I understand, okay? I understand. But it is a gift to be around our kids this much. You know, it's hard to spiritually form and shape our kids and point them to Jesus if we're distant. Not just physically distant, but emotionally distant. Like how do we instruct our kids and guide our kids in the way of Jesus if we're just not around both physically and emotionally? We need to be present with our kids. Parents, you should be incredible at learning your child, asking great questions, not just yes or no questions, because that's the response we typically get when we ask, how's your day? Good. No, we need to be incredible at knowing them, understanding them, being present so that we can ultimately shape them. It is a gift to be with our kids. So as we move forward, remember that your presence, it's irreplaceable in your child's life. Number 2, be predictable. What does that mean? We live in a culture that has, I would say, bipolar in nature. You're saying, what does that mean? When it comes to our faith, we tend to be bipolar. We act a certain way on Sundays, and then Monday through Saturday, we act very, very different. We've seen the stats that a majority of Americans would raise their hand and say, yes, I am a Jesus follower. I'm a Christian. And then when we look at lifestyle choices, we see that there's very little difference between a Christian household and a non-Christian household. Why? Well, we're bipolar spiritually. We do one thing on Sunday and do something completely different Monday through Saturday. So this whole idea of being predictable, that when Joshua put his flag in the ground, he planted it and said, as for me and my household, his household knew what to expect when they were at the house on Monday. or Wednesday evening or Thursday morning. They knew that who Joshua was in front of the people of God, he was going to be the very same at the household. Our kids should know that we're very predictable when it comes to our faith. That it's not just a Sunday morning faith, but no, they say, no, mom and dad follow Jesus Monday through Saturday. They're predictable. I know that they're going to choose Jesus no matter the situation or circumstance. And they are imperfect as everybody, but they're predictable in that they seek forgiveness. They confess their sins. If you're here and you're single, or maybe you don't have any kids in the household, I would say this applies to you just as well. Be predictable in your faith. Not just a Sunday Christian, no, a Christian that's 24/7. Last, be proactive. Joshua gathered the people of God and then was very proactive in saying, you can serve who you would like. I'm encouraging you to serve the Lord, but I want to let you know that we are going to serve him, me and my household. He's taking initiative. He's not sitting back saying, spoon feed me. He's like, no, I'm going to take responsibility for my household. Parents, you have to be proactive in shaping your children. It just doesn't naturally happen. Think about the goals you have for your life, the career goals, maybe the health goals that you have. You know, they just often don't happen by chance. You got to plan. You got to be proactive. You got to take initiative. The same is true for our spiritual health. You have to do all those things. So we have to be proactive. If you're here and you're single, you have to be proactive in your faith. It doesn't just naturally happen. You don't stumble upon just loving Jesus and following him deeply. No, it's hard work. Jesus says, take up your cross daily and follow me. And what I love about this last one is the perfect example of our Father in heaven. Like we needed salvation. Like we had run, we had rebelled from him. There's nobody that's perfect in here. We had left the estate of our Father through our sin. And he proactively chased after us. The Father devised this wonderful plan of redemption where his Son, his one and only Son, would come live a perfect, sinless life. The life that you and I should have lived. Die a death on a cross in our place for our sins, and 3 days later, rise from the dead, so that he could offer you and me salvation. Salvation comes from trusting Jesus, not being a good person, but trusting in the goodness of God through Jesus. He was proactive. And so you and I, we trust Jesus, and then we're proactive in our home. So what does it look like to cultivate a home that's pointing people to Jesus, pointing kids to Jesus, taking responsibility? It looks like we're present. We're there. It looks like we're predictable. They know what they can expect from us. And last, it certainly looks like we're proactive.